Hello and welcome. We here at CF Students have the great honor and privilege of helping students and their families follow Jesus. We do this through our weekly services as well as our online content. Now, typically we have a lot of conversations with our students, and some of those topics can be pretty tough. So we are inviting some of our students and leaders to come here and have a conversation on those topics. Now, some of these topics can be sensitive in nature, so parental discretion is advised. Please like and share and subscribe to this channel to support this ministry and the impact that we are having on the lives of these students. And with that said, let's talk about it.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. We've been in this series and we're talking about a very sensitive topic. And we're gonna talk today about grieving. And I wanna start off just by asking yes or no question. Have you personally gone through grieving, or you know someone that went through grieving? And so I'm gonna open up. Amaris, yes or no, have you gone through personal grieving?
Yeah.
Yeah, how about you, Ree?
Yeah, when I lost my dad.
Okay, how about you, Isa?
Yes.
Yes, and I personally myself have gone through grieving. So I just want to open up the floor here. Talk about your experience with grieving, what happened, who it was, how you dealt with it, all of the above. So, Ree.
In 2018, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and he had like one surgery procedure, and it like went away. But then it came back. Last year in January and February, he had one surgery in January, one surgery in February, and it helped it out. But in last year, towards the ending, October 28th through November 7th, he started getting radiations for the cancer. It was kidney cancer. He did 5 sessions within those weeks. And then December 15th, they operated him again for his thyroid because they thought like that was like the cause of it, like that'll help it out. After that procedure, starting January 4th, he was in and out of the hospital a lot. And then it started getting worse towards like April and May. And then May 6th, he passed away in the afternoon.
Like, were you there personally when he passed away, or?
Yeah, it was about an hour or two after I arrived, because he went into hospice. He passed away May 6th. That was a Saturday. That Thursday around 3:30, he went into hospice, and then that Friday I was there the whole day with him, with my mom, and then Saturday afternoon when I was there, like 2 hours after it all happened. It was hard, obviously, because it was like I was in front of like when it happened.
Yeah.
Right now I'm like in a little bit of denial, but also like partly accepting what happened, because it's like my mind's now like getting used to like, oh, like he's not around no more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So my grandma passed away on August 12th, 2022. It was me and my mom and dad were at work. She wasn't answering phone calls for like a day or two. I think it was a day. We went to her house. My mom screamed. I was outside with my dad. Well, no, my dad was going outside, and then I saw my mom crying. It really scared me.
It's okay. Take your time.
And she found her on the ground dead, which it caused me anxiety to know that she was gone, and it really scared me because I knew she wasn't there. She would take me everywhere. She would take me. She would take care of me when my mom would go to work. And just to know that she was gone really hurt me.
Like for me, what I went through, it was the beginning of the pandemic. It was actually the week of my birthday. Yeah, the week of my birthday was March 24, and I was feeling kind of sick. I was working in the medical field, and the whole talk about COVID, and I was a nurse at the time. I was helping around, and I felt really bad. Like, we had a birthday party, and I was feeling good in the morning, and then at that night, I just felt like heaviness. I was like, oh my God, I'm sick. And by the end, I told my mom, I'm like, I just want everyone to leave. Like, I just want to go home. Like, I just want to not go home, go to my bed. I want to go to sleep. And so the next day, I went to get tested, and I was in the field, and obviously I was positive for COVID.
Yeah.
And the next 2 days, I was trying to stay away from my parents, but they came into my room trying to look for me, try to be with me, and they all started getting sick. And my birthday was on a Tuesday. By Friday, we were already sick. And then by the following Wednesday, actually, my dad was feeling good. He was in bed, and I went into his room that morning, and he was good. He went down, because we live in a 2-floor house. He went down, he got some food. I told him, hey, we gotta eat. Like, this is the only way we could fight this, because he wasn't eating too much. And he ate a little sandwich, and then that afternoon, I went to check on him again. I was already feeling better. And when I got close to him, I started noticing he was purple. And I woke him up. I'm like, hey, you gotta wake up. You gotta get your head up because you're out of oxygen. And he was a little like out of it. He's like, what? And I pick him up and I tell him, hey, you gotta wake up. And then my mom comes in, and she's like screaming. She's like, oh my God, his oxygen level. And so we called the ambulance right away, and the ambulance arrived to the scene. And it was crazy, because I was trying to be like good with the ambulance and told them, hey, look, we're positive.
Yeah.
And I think at that moment, no one knew what was going on with COVID, so they freaked out. They were like, oh, no. They were scared of touching my dad.
Yeah.
They were like, from afar, they were looking at him, and they were saying, no, it's a panic attack that he's having. I was like, my dad has never had a panic attack. What do you mean, a panic attack? And I remember I was angry, because I was like, bro, this is oxygen. Like, can you check his levels? And they were like, no, it's a panic attack. And I got so angry. I'm just like, can y'all leave? Leave. I'll take care of this. So I took that moment. I called my uncles, 2 of my uncles, and I told them, hey, look, do you need? And so I called my uncles, and I'm like, look, we're positive for COVID, but my father is like out of oxygen. We need to get him into the hospital as soon as possible. I can't let my mom see this, because she's freaking out. She's screaming, she's crying, she's praying to God, and we're praying for him. And I'm like, I told my uncles, I'm like, you need to get here, like, wear an astronaut suit, whatever, like, cover up, because we need to get him out. And at this point, he was already unconscious. And it's crazy, because like I said, we live in a second two-story house. And so he was unconscious, and he was a heavy guy. And we had to get him with the sheets out of the bed.
Dang.
So it was 2 of my uncles, myself, just getting him out of the sheet. And they're unconscious, so it even weighs more, because it's like dead weight. And I remember just holding my dad's head, like, in that moment, and just see him and come in and out unconscious. And I was just praying, and I was like, God, just do what you can do, and praying about it. And because I knew that God could do miracles, and I've read it in the Bibles, I've seen it. In that moment, I was like, God, do as you please. And so we took him to the hospital. And at that moment in the pandemic, you couldn't go into the hospitals. So just having faith that God would do it, we turned him into the ER, they closed the door on us, and we couldn't hear anything. I remember we walked around the hospital, me and my mom. It was already night. We walked around, and we were praying and just saying that God do his will. That that's the moment where I kind of felt like fear.
Yeah.
Like at the moment I felt like I couldn't like grasp it all when it was happening. But at that moment, walking around the hospital, I felt a little fear. I was like, what if? And then that fear came into me, and I remember I was just praying to God saying, please do a miracle. And I went home and I went to sleep that night, and that fear came upon me, and also even more because I was sick still. So holding my dad and everything, it kind of hurt my lungs because I was still sick, and I felt this chest pain. And it was obviously from like the anxiety and the fear and everything, and I just felt this chest pain. And being in the medical field, you know, anything that has to do with chest pain is like, okay, what could happen?
Yeah.
And so I fell asleep with fear, fearing for my dad and actually fearing for myself. Will I wake up tomorrow because of this chest pain? But it was because I was aspirated from breathing in and out because of the COVID that hit my lungs and everything. And so I went into fear and I fell asleep with fear. And I remember it was like 3:30, I get a phone call and it's like vibrating my phone, and I woke up like out of orbit, and I pick up the phone, and I guess it was the nurse that was on shift. He was just out of breath. And I feel like he was running to get the phone, and he's out of breath, and he's like, Josser. I'm like, yeah? He's like, your father passed away. And he was like, I took the phone, I put it out, and I had to take a moment to see if it was a dream or not, because I was still half asleep.
Yeah.
But he was like out of breath, and he's like, Josser, your father's passed away.
Wow.
And I remember just hanging up. I didn't even ask anything. I hang up, and I see it again, my call log, and it was there. And my mom was next to me because she was afraid too, and she slept with me in the same bed. And she looked at me and she starts crying, and she goes, what happened? And I didn't tell her anything. She knew already with my face.
Yeah.
And I remember she got up from the bed and she ran to the next room out of despair. Like I never seen my mom like that. And my mom is a strong woman. I've always seen her and strong in faith.
Yeah.
She's always taught me the word, and seeing that moment of disparity, of denial, broke my heart.
Yeah.
Like even knowing that my father passed away broke my heart, but seeing my mom in that despair, like holding her hand, holding her head and just crying out, saying, why did this happen? Like to this day, it just, when I replay that scenery, it just, it affects me still.
No, and like I could relate, because I remember when my grandpa passed away and seeing my mom. And so basically, to make long story short, my grandpa was having like health issues, and he lives in New Jersey. So this is around like COVID time, and obviously like we can't go over there. But I think it was I want to say 2021. Still COVID, but like you're allowed to like go into the hospital, right? So I remember October of 2021, I believe it was. I don't know if I'm getting the dates right, but we were able to go into the hospital one by one. And it was bad. Like we had gotten a phone call, like, you guys need to come over here. Like we think that's it, like it's bad. So we're going, and we go to see my grandpa, and I remember just going into the hospital and like crying, because I didn't know how serious like it really was. And I see him, and like you just said right now, like you could like replay it in your head. I'm replaying it right now, and I remember walking into the ICU room, and I said, Grandpa, like I'm here. And my mom has always told me, like, if his eyes aren't open or anything, like they could still hear you. Yeah. So I'm like, Grandpa, I'm here. And he like opens his eyes, and he looks at me, and he goes and he holds my hand.
he starts like hitting my hand like that. And my grandpa's like a very strong man, like a tall man like you, and he's like hitting my hand. And I'm like, Grandpa, you know, I love you and all these things. And it was hard being there because I felt like he was going to pass away right in front of me. Like, it's one of those things that is so scary. So I wasn't there for too long. I left, and I'm like, Ma, like I can't be here. I gotta go. So we were there. I want to say maybe like a week or whatever, just going back and forth into the hospital. And at one point, like they were telling my mom, like, yeah, like I think, you know, we're going to take him out. Like, you know, it doesn't seem any good. And eventually we had to come back home to Miami, and we were just praying, man. We were just like, God, you know, like you said, like if it's your will, like let it be done. But by the grace of God, God gave us another 6 months with him. And like, it was crazy because he was in the worst. I'm telling you, like, this man had every little health problem going on. And we got another 6 months. And I had gone to go see my grandpa in April, and he was in I think it was like a nursing home or one of those things. And I remember just being with him. He's there in his wheelchair, and we couldn't get near him. Like, we had masks and everything, we couldn't get near him. And we were just spending time with him, and I really took in those moments because I remember how it was in October. And I was like, look, I could have lost you then, you know? So I'm cherishing this right now. And I remember leaving and telling him, Grandpa, I'll see you again. I'll see you again, see you soon. 2 weeks later, we're at home, and my mom gets a phone call, and she just starts screaming. And I get out of my room, and I'm like, yo, like what happened? And she couldn't even say it. Like, she was like just screaming, and she was like, Boppy died. And I'm like, Boppy? And I'm like, and I like go back to my room, and I lay down in my bed, and in my mind I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, Grandpa died. I'm like, no. So I went back out to my room. She's like there screaming, and she's like, Poppy died. Whatever, we had our moment there where they're crying or whatever, but that, like, my grandpa dying really hurt me because I've had my grandma died when I was 3, and obviously, like, I'm young. I at our funeral, I was telling everyone, Grandma's sleeping, you know, I didn't know anything until a few weeks later. But for my grandpa, that one really hurt because, you know, it's my grandpa. So I understand, like, all of you guys when you say, like, you know, going in and out of hospitals. I know exactly that feeling, how your mom felt. Like, bro, seeing your mom in that state is like the worst. And obviously I could relate to you too, because it was your grandma, you know, so, but.
So I'll open up the floor. How did we cope with the grieving season? What helped you cope with it?
Definitely coming to church and being around like a Christian community and having like all the support from everyone here. Like, cause okay, I didn't let it known to like everyone like what was going on, but I did have like specific leaders like that was around, like let them know, because I was like very like unstable, like mentally, physically, like in any way. And I was like, hey, if I ever like run away and I start crying, like a heads up, like this is like the reason of like a couple things that may happen. So that definitely helped, and having like them pray over me, and most of them would text me every day. And like once like she texted me like a few times, and like even the day like that it happened, because it took me a few hours to like post it, like obviously because I took like a break from my phone. But like even when she saw it, and she was like, oh, like I was thinking about you, like in the morning, like you came like into my heart. And it was like having that support helped me through like the whole process, because like I knew I wasn't alone, but also like having like more people with me helped.
Yeah, I think for me, what gave me peace was knowing that my grandpa left in peace, one, because in those 2 weeks when I was in New Jersey and then I came back, during those 2 weeks, he was fine. Like, he was in the best health ever. And the way that he passed was just being in bed, you know? And my mom had prayed that if he passed, like I pray that he won't be suffering like how he was in ICU. And so he passed fine. And what had peace in my heart was that one, like he loved Jesus. And I knew that he would be with the Lord. And I knew that there's no longer peace. I mean, there's no longer suffering. There's no longer pain. So for me, that's what gave me peace in my heart.
Yes, yeah, me too. My grandma died peacefully. It was a stroke, so it was very quickly. Yeah, it was just very hurtful.
How did you cope with it?
Knowing that other people suffered too just made me know that I wasn't alone. And my family comforted me, and everyone in my church comforted me. Yeah, Gabriel especially comforted me a lot.
That's good. We could see, I mean, how I remember at the time I kind of closed myself.
Yeah, because you were angry.
Yeah, I was literally angry with God during that time. And I couldn't show emotions because of my mom.
Yeah.
It was hard. It took a real hard toll on my mom. And like I said, she was a strong woman in faith, and she was a prayer warrior, and she went into deep depression. And she knows me well, like she would see me and her attitude, like the attitudes that I would give. And if she noticed me a little bit sad, she would just drown in tears. And so at that moment, my mom needed me to be the strong support. And I couldn't cope with my grieving. I didn't process my grieving until I say a few months later. And the way that I coped it was actually writing down my feelings I would go on the app, my note app, and I would start writing kind of like little prayers, like little devotionals to myself. Like as I was feeling, I would be like, I'm feeling this way. And even, funny enough, I would even write to God and to my dad what I was doing that day.
Yeah.
Like today I had to pack up your clothes.
Yeah.
Like I had to get your clothes out of your closet. Like that helped me cope with like my feelings, because like I said, I couldn't grieve, because any moment I would feel kind of sad, my mom would see me and she'll start crying out. And I'm like, I have to be strong for her. So that's one of the ways I coped with my grieving, was just writing down my emotions and letting it to God.
How because I just thought of this right now, because both of y'all lost your dad. Like, how did you guys how did that change your home life? Like now without your dad, like how is it? I know you have George, but how has it been?
It's definitely okay, the thing with me is that my mind throughout the day, since he would work, he'll be gone by 6:30 in the morning until 4 or 7ish, depending his hour, if he worked overtime.
Yeah.
So most of the time it's my mind sets to he's at work, or he's on a work trip. And it's definitely hard though, because once it hits the hours that he normally walks in the house, it's he's not gonna walk through. But it definitely helps having a brother, because it's another male figure in your life, because it helps, because things that I would normally do with my dad, or the things he would help me with, I know I can ask my brother to help me with, especially since he's older and he has more experiences. I know through a lot, through the whole situation, it was an 8-month situation. I had a lot of doubts, and I was going through a lot in my brain, and I would talk to him, or I would talk to leaders. I had a big support team with me. But I could agree with you though, I did not go to my mom for nothing, because it was I didn't want her worrying about me when she was still trying to pick herself up and to get through the situation. So I normally would go to my older sister, my brother, or 5 leaders that I'm very close with.
To me, it was a hard shift, because during that time, I was a student. I was studying to try to go into medical school. And so my father passing away was literally me changing roles from being provided to now being the provider of the house.
Yeah.
Even to learn everything from where to pay bills, what number do I call for my house rent and all of this. I had to process all of that quick because bills are due every month. And so I had to learn it real, like nobody's gonna go, oh, you're going through a grieving, I'm sorry. No, your bills are due. So I had to learn, where do I call for light? Where do I call for water? Where do I go for this?
Yeah.
What's the password for this login? I had to learn all of that and calling the people. It's like, hey, and every person I had to tell, hey, my father passed away. But now I gotta take, and so I would have to write emails explaining, sending out the death certificate, putting me as the one that's gonna take charge of that account now. It was tough. It was tough. It was a lot to cope all at once.
It's definitely a lot to like see, because I remember seeing my mom having to do that whole process, and like just the stress and all that stuff, because like you're trying to grieve, but then it's also like now you have to grab the money from this account or like whatever, and it's like it's tough, you know. And I feel like during things like this, it's good to have people around you, you know, like to talk to, so that you're not alone, you know, because it's hard to put everything on your shoulders, you know.
Yeah, like knowing that she was gone, me going outside, because we changed our garage because it was pretty big into our house. Knowing that she wasn't there, me going outside, like knowing like she's like, oh, I can't knock on the door to say hi to her anymore, or like her.
Because she lives close?
Yeah,
Or?
she lived like our backyard had a really big garage. Like it was like, imagine, it was like our house size but the back. And she lived in the back of our like backyard. So like knowing that I couldn't knock and say hi, or her coming out, like just like, oh, she's not there anymore.
Yeah, that's tough. I feel like that moment of like going to your dad's room, or you know, seeing a picture, or going to the garage, me going to my dad's bedroom and not seeing them it's hard. And I feel like even to this day, I feel like going into my parents' room and not able to see him there is still, to me, is tough.
I feel like, because like, at least for me, in my mind, it's like you believe like life is like forever. Like sometimes, like for some certain people, like I can't imagine my mom dying, you know? Like that's why it's like when I hear like your story, it's like it could happen to anyone, anytime, any day, you know? And like for me, in my mind, it's hard when you see that there's no longer that person there, no longer your grandma, no longer your father, no longer my grandpa, you know? But I feel like we just have to like rest on the Lord, knowing that He's in control and that everything will be okay, you know? We have people around us, you know, and we just have to believe, you know, for the better.
Yeah, like I used to see her like twice a day, and like now that like
It's
I'm
hard.
like, wait, what? She's gone? Like like it's like, whoa, she's gone, but it's like sometimes my mind plays tricks. She's like, she's here, but she's not.
Question for you guys: how do you feel God moved during that season?
I know for me, my grandpa's story, I know helped your brother, because I remember we were having a Devo one time, and your brother was saying how my brother had talked to him about what happened, and this story had helped George, you know? And I think you could see it two ways. You could either see this as like, this is terrible, you know, why did this person die? Or you could use your story as a testimony, you know? And I believe that even this conversation will be a testimony to someone else's life. Like they see hope at the end of it.
I was like, okay, one mindset that I really went through for like a month or two was like, oh, like everyone tells me like God's good, God's with you, but why is He putting me through this?
Yeah.
And it took me a while, because that was like my mindset. But and then I talked to my brother about it, and he was like, we're never gonna understand the reasons of anything that happens. Like, we're not meant to know because it's God's plan. And one thing that helped me was I was reading James. And in James, it talks about like how you're gonna go through like trials to like test like your faithfulness. And that helped me because it was like, so this is a trial. So in this time, instead of like thinking God's against me and going away from him, I should like be leaning more towards him. And that helped me, but it was definitely hard because at some moments my mindset would go to like God's against me, instead of like me wanting to go to him. But my brother definitely helped me out in that season.
Yeah, it really helped me with everything. He took me through the ways, but it's just so sad just to know she's gone. Like, everyone helped me, but especially knowing she's gone and my mom being all sad, it just really hurt me.
How do you feel God helped you?
So he has helped me he's been going all the ways with me. He's also, I didn't really understand why he would do that, but until I'm understanding it was her time to go.
And I feel like as humans, we're selfish that we don't want people to go. But God has a plan.
Yeah.
God has from the foundations of earth, and he has a day that we come in and a day that we leave. And it's so hard to disconnect to that. And I feel like during my season of grieving, how God moved, one of the first, and this is a testimony, like I said, I was being provided for, and so we had money saved up, my family, and the funeral cost was crazy.
Oh no, those things are ridiculous.
Especially like last minute when you don't have it planned, they jack up the price. And especially like during the pandemic. And I remember going to the funeral, and it's crazy because the funeral happened 40 days after my father passed away because we kept on testing positive. So the funeral told us we couldn't do the funeral until we had a negative test. And so that was even hard too, going 40 days without touching our family, without seeing our family. We were locked up in our house for 40 days. And so during that time, we get the estimate of the funeral, and I remember seeing it, and I'm like, wow, this is literally all of our savings. And I told God, I need you to do a miracle in this. Show me you're real. Show me you're real.
Yeah.
And so that night I prayed about it, and it came to and I know this was God putting it in my heart, create a GoFund. I created a GoFund, went on, I put the exact amount to the last cent, put it out there, and I put it on Facebook, I put it on Instagram, and then I just started receiving a whole bunch of emails, because you get a notification every time someone donates. And I just started seeing my phone just blasting, like ding, 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 ding. And then people were, I didn't even want to see it. I knew it was people donating, but I didn't even want to see it. And then people were calling me, it's like, are you seeing your GoFund? I'm like, no, I'm not. It's like, go check it out. And I kid you not, in less than 24 hours, I receive an email that GoFund says, you have reached your goal.
That's awesome.
In less than 24 hours. The amount that I needed for my funeral, to give my dad a good funeral, it wasn't even like a lavish, it was just a normal, God provided. And there is when I knew that, we hear pastors saying, God is your provider, God is Jireh, right? But until you experience it, that's a whole nother level. That's when I knew that God was my provider. Jehovah Jireh, he is my provider. Because I experienced it from an email receiving that I had my goal. And that to me, that's how God showed to me that he was there through it. Even though, because it's hard. God never promised that we won't go through pain and suffering, but he will be there with us through it all. We're gonna pass storms. There's people that are gonna pass away, but he will always be there for us.
I love that though, because it's like he promises so many things, and he promises like he'll be our provider, and then like even in that, like he'll be our comforter, you know. And during that time, it was probably like you probably felt discomfort, like where am I going to get this money? But even you were like, wow, now I have everything I need. Thank you, God. You know, I feel like God is, no matter what, is going to be glorified in every situation.
This was a good talk. I feel like we expressed our grieving, and I feel like this will help people out there. And I feel like it's a hard topic, but expressing ourselves and telling other people what we've been through and how God has always been faithful is the way that we can share a testimony. And that is the gospel right there, because we share what God has done for us. I feel like that's amazing. Each of our stories, how we went from losing someone, but knowing that God is always with us.
Yeah.
That is amazing.